Hey, how's it going guys? I grabbed this macro lens and went in the park to do some macro photography. And I learned 7 things from this experience, and I'm gonna share these things with you guys so that if you never did macro photography in nature before, you're gonna know what to expect. I usually do street photography. This is what I enjoy the most. Macro photography is something new for me, but I wanted to try to see if I like it. At the ending of this clip, I'm gonna show you all the photos that I made that day. Okay, let's get started with the 7 things that I learned from this new experience. First thing is that macro photography in nature relaxes you. Really, I highly recommend it. If you ever want to chill, grab a macro lens and go outside and do some macro photography. But why is this photography genre so relaxing? Well, in order to do macro photography, oftentimes you have to stay put and just observe. The details that you can capture with the macro lens are so small that you really have to slow down and get closer. By slowing down and by having your focus on nature, you get more of what nature has to offer, that relaxation. Second thing, and now comes the difficulties guys, if you want to get something that moves in focus, it's really hard to do that. This happens especially if you get close to the maximum magnification ratio of your lens. But why is it so hard to get something in focus that moves? It's because being very close to your subject with the macro lens creates a very small portion of sharpness. That's how it is with a macro lens. 1 millimeter in front or behind really matters a lot. Just look at how many photos I made to get the bee's eye in focus, to see the texture from its eye. Moving subjects are hard to photograph, especially with a macro lens. But what about a subject that doesn't move, like the grass, a branch, or a leaf? Are these things easier to photograph? Yes, they are, as long as the wind doesn't blow. Because the third lesson is that the smallest wind can create difficulties while you're doing macro photography. If you never did macro photography in nature before, take this into consideration also. It is the same problem as with insects. You find something to photograph and suddenly it moves, and your subject is not in focus anymore. It helps, of course, to hold the branch with one hand, but this helps until a certain point, because you can't hold everything in one place with one hand. So the wind, another obstacle for your macro photography. But what about a tripod? Does a tripod help? The 4th lesson that I learned is that a tripod slows you down. In 99% of the cases, you don't need a tripod. It's better to leave it home. The fact that you have to carry it, the adjustments that you have to make each time you take a new shot, these things reduce your mobility, your efficiency, and it also gets you tired. The combination of tripod and macro lens is good if you want to do something really specific. For example, you know a spot where insects usually cross, and you want to capture a couple of frames from there. Or if you want to do video. For video work, yes, a tripod is very useful. But for regular macro photography, I learned that the best place for a tripod to be is at home. The 5th lesson, you need a lot of light. When the sun goes behind some thick clouds, it creates difficulties. In this situation, the ISO value must go up and the shutter speed and the aperture value must go down. For safety, a macro lens doesn't have to stay at its widest apertures. Also for safety, the shutter speed doesn't have to go at values that are smaller than 250th of a second. It is already hard to do macro photography with the optimal conditions, but when the sun is covered by thick clouds, everything becomes harder. So a solution for this is to have a flash together with a diffuser. Lesson number 6. If you want to get some good shots, you really have to move. This was already valid for the other photography genres like portrait photography or street photography. But when you're concentrating on macro, your muscles feel more tension. You have to bend over to stay in an uncomfortable position for some time. The angles are also important. To photograph your subject from the right side, the left side, from above or below, this is how you find the best angle. All these things put you to work. But if we want to get those great shots, we don't have to be lazy. This is what macro photography shows us. It gets us out of our comfort zone. And now we've reached the 7th lesson that I learned. As you saw, only in the first lesson, things are nice and easy. In the rest of the lessons, I show you only difficulties. The fact that macro photography is hard. And yes, it is, but you want to know what? It is worth it because you get to appreciate more of what's around you. You get to appreciate nature more. Now you're seeing the photos that I made in the park that day. For sure, we see the importance of an insect if we spend more time next to it, if we observe its behavior. Also, we get to appreciate nature's textures more, to see its complexities and its beauty. Yes, macro photography is hard, but it also helps us to relax. It helps us to slow down a little bit so that in the ending, we're gonna appreciate more of what's around us. These were my 7 lessons for all of you who want to do macro photography in nature for the first time. If these lessons were useful for you, have a minimum interaction with this video and press that like button. And we're gonna hear each other next time. Bye.